last time we implemented a simple structure to record changes like inserts and removes. So far we can only insert one character or remove one character. These are essentially the same, but they might change, so I broken up a bit into a union. Also, we have this edit history, which basically just has room for 1000 edits. And when it's full, so we can just demonstrate that I lower the amount of entries we have. If I recompile now and try to insert or to do more changes than 32, it will just assert on us because I don't support anymore right now. So all that we hopefully will fix today. So yeah. So first things first, we have this undo, and now we want to do redo. And also, right now in our undo, we decrement the record count, which is wrong because the record count tells us how many entries we have. But if we do an undo, we essentially still want to memorize how many entries we have, but we want to reduce a counter which represents how many of them have been undone. So I'm just gonna call this undo count. Oh. I don't know. I'm just gonna call it used count. It's a dumb name. We'll fix it later if it gets annoying. So, and the idea would be that the used count is the same as the record count as long as we never do an undo. But if we do an undo, we do not decrement the record count. We just decrement the used. Yeah, well, that's a dumb name. Yeah, I'm gonna keep this for now as it's a dumb name, but we will, as soon as I figure it out what would be an appropriate name. So, bye Strelsu. Thanks for sticking around a little bit. And now we have to also take the use count instead of the record count, check whether or not we have records at all that we can do. And let's think about it. Now, if we ever insert something, we have to kind of reset this counts. If we ever record an insert, instead of just incrementing record count, what we actually want to do is take our record count and set it to our, we take our used count, which is, yeah, that makes sense. Take our used count, increment that, and we have to set our record count to our used count. Because that's something that maybe a little picture is no good old paint. Imagine our undo redo system is just a stack like so. Put in some entries here. Whatever. And we have a in our undo use count sits here, for instance. If we decrement the use count, say it sits here, and our record count, which keeps track of the maximum entries we have recorded, let's say this is the record count. Our use count can be lower because we undid, in this case, we undid 2 changes. But if the user is in this state and does a new change, which is not an undo or a redo, we basically want to get rid of everything above our current state and fill it with new entries. So in that case, we have to reset the record count and increment both of them so that they both end up to be the highest point. So basically, if you undo and then you type something new, you basically lose all the all the future redos that you had previously. That's the idea. So we increment the use count, and then we set the record count to equal the use count, so that we basically clear everything after our current count. And we need to do the same thing for our remove. Maybe it gets a little hard to read. At the bottom, like so. And we have similar thing going on in our remove, record remove. Gonna do it the exact same thing. So far so good. Let's first verify that this works still. Oh, I have some errors. Hi. What don't you like? Already has a body. Yeah, of course. I want to call this a redo. But we're not using it right now, so that's fine. Okay, good. Hello world. Hello new world. By new world. By screen. And now we're gonna do the undo. Oh, we already have an error. Wow. So something is wrong, obviously. Investigate. We're gonna use Visual Studio to debug our executable and see where we do something horribly wrong that crashes the application. So let's try that again. And just undo. Okay, that's already messed up. So see one of our changes then. What did I do that is so third? So we have record count, insert, increment count, and we set the record count. That's fine. Well, it looks more me. Oh, this is wrong because I changed it here in the copy, which I wanted to use for the redo, but I didn't change it in the original undo. Basically, it was still operating on the wrong field. That all the change. Oh, why do I have this open? Studio nonsense. Okay, good. Let's try this again. World. Now we hit do again. And everything, including our typo, has been that. How we can furiously tackle the redo, which in our case we can only redo if our use count is smaller than record count. So remember, so essentially we're at this situation, and the redo would basically go up the stack so that we can just repeat the step that the user did. First of all, we need to make sure that we actually have something that we can redo. And for that, we can just do the reverse of, oops. Yeah, no. We do the reverse counting-wise of the undo. So we just increment the use count, then we take whatever that record is. And now we essentially would just have to flip this code upside down. So if it is a remove, we have to do the remove again. And if it's not a remove, we have to do the insert again. Basically, insert again. So basically, we just swap those two branches around. Probably not as easy as this, but that would be the potential idea. And now if we search for our undo, we have it here, and I can now basically copy this and maybe the F8 key because track arrow on my keyboard, and I just gonna do the redo and see if that works. It's a bit hard to see for you guys whether or not I pressed any of these buttons, so I'm not sure how I want to visualize that so that you don't have to take my word for this behavior. But maybe we get to that in a moment. So hello world. Now I hit undo. And now I hit redo. So that didn't work, obviously. Okay, so far that did nothing. Not quite sure why, but that's so many things open already. Don't like it. This is day whatever. This is our current day. I'm gonna drag our edit file in here. See what happens if we actually hit undo. Bugging is so much fun. I undo, and now I want to redo. So I get here, that's good. Our use count is 5 and our record count is 10. And now the question is, does that make a sense? Yeah, we undid a 5 letters of world, I guess. Oh yeah, I got this backwards. So it needs to that needs to be the case for which we run the loop instead of to determine that we do not run the loop. So that's the other way around. So that's not. Essentially, if our use count is bigger equal than our record count, then that means there's nothing above our use count in the stacks. We're basically at the top, so there is no more history that we can repeat. So let's try that again. Little small mistakes, but it happens all the time. Well, I undo. Now I redo. Almost. Cursor is placed wrong, but other than that, it replicated the proper word. So let's see why that would be the issue. So redo needs to, when we record a remove, we can look at the code. Yeah, it records the cursor as it is. So basically it records the cursor before the remove happens. And in our undo, we had to specify the cursor after the operation happened so that we can convert it. In our redo, we don't have to do that. We essentially use the exact value that was recorded to repeat the operation. So let's see. Oh, and I undo again, and now I redo. Oh, that's cool. Try something more intricate. So that was a rather complicated editing for our purposes. Now I'm gonna undo everything so that we should remain with the blank text. Okay, that worked. And now I'm gonna redo everything, and it crashes immediately. Okay, I didn't expect this one. Interesting. So why was that? Okay. Oop, my mouse is stuck. Oh my. A wire. So try simplest case. Yeah. Oh, trigger the breakpoint. Oh yeah, because this assert is wrong. It was correct for the previous for the undo, but it's wrong for the. In our case, it's fine that the cursor is actually at 0. Why do you open so many windows? Oh my god, Visual Studio, please. So this assert basically was correct for this old code because we were subtracting one from it, and I wanted to make sure that we don't do any stupid mistakes so that this would overflow. But in this case, it's actually okay because any valid, any position greater equal 0 should be fine as long as it's yeah, as long as it's within the text width length. So we close the application a little bit prematurely. And now I'm just gonna undo, and now I'm gonna redo. Okay, cool. New world, buy new world. And now I'm gonna undo everything. And now I'm gonna redo everything. A little bit slower so that I can see if something looks weird. No, I think that worked, and we can repeat this all the time now. So yeah, well, it's also already pretty good. The only thing that you might have noticed is that we do this on a per letter basis. So your editor needs to be a little bit smarter in order to determine that you want to delete or maybe undo or redo a whole token, like a name or something. It needs to be aware what is a name and what is a token that it should do in a burst, basically. Because while you are typing it, you're just placing one character after another, but semantically what you mean to type is a whole word. So for instance, you could imagine that if I undo now, I undo the exclamation point, but if I would undo now, I want to undo a whole word, not just maybe this time I want to undo this space, but now I would want to undo the whole word good because it's one word and consists of letters. So we could try to do that, but I rather do the I rather try to fix our limitations that we have with the undo, because right now we can only ever insert 1000 characters before our editor basically crashes. So yeah, let's see. In order to do that, I will first reduce this number so that we can do quicker iterations testing. And the idea here would be that if our buffer is ever full, so another quick drawing. Wow, this is not helpful. So yeah, let's do this. Oh my god, stop. So I cannot move it because it's too small. Well played, well played. I also love it that you always have to specify that you want transparent selection. This is, let's assume this is our full buffer, and eventually it's going to be full. So the idea would be that instead of just stopping, we just override whatever was inserted way back in the past, so that we still can undo the things that are relevant to us for the near past, but we kind of don't have long-term memory. If that makes any sense. The idea would be that you have a marker which says, well, this is where our history starts, and maybe this is where our record count is, and we have this many items, but this this bar could actually wrap around and like so, and the content of the buffer essentially would be I'm running out of colors. There's just so few colors. So the idea would be that everything behind the green bar and in front of the purple bar is a valid record, and everything in the other way around would be free for us to add to it. And whenever this purple bar tries to cross the green bar, because we don't have any more room left, we essentially end up in a situation where we yeah, it's really hard to do this with paint, but hey, so essentially we do not allow the green bar to cross the purple bar to cross the green bar, but they can essentially be overlap like so. Oh my god. So like so, and all we do is if we ever want to add a new entry, we move both of those bars together so that we forget this entry here and add it as a new entry, so we kind of advance both of them at the same time. So this is a ring buffer or roll around buffer or whatever you want to call it. So that's what we want to implement, and for that we do need to track basically the green point. I would just track the green one and keep the counts. So I would just call this like offset of first entry for first index. And now all we have to do, actually two things we have to do. No, we have the count, so that should be fine. So essentially all we have to do is whenever we insert and we see, and we see that we are out of space, instead of not doing anything in that case, we just gonna do, oh, that's the wrong. This one, it was just an assert, but now it becomes a if branch. If we say that if our use count ever becomes greater than how many records we can hold, we will essentially just increase our first index. So we forget the entry that was the furthest in the past. So and we have to make sure that it wraps around properly. So if it is at the end, we want it to go back to the beginning of the buffer. So what we're gonna do is take whatever the first index is, add 1 to it, and modulo it with how many records we have, so that our first index always stays in range. So and now when we access a record, we cannot just use the use count. We have to use a well, we can make a function for that. Yeah, why not? Do I want that function to pointer? All this little helper function does is get record. This might not be a valid record yet, but all we do is we have a history and we want some index relative to our first index. Get whatever record is at that position. So all we need to do is we have our index and we add in our history first index to that and modulo it by the buffer capacity, so that the index is always in range within our buffer. Then we use that index and return that record. Yeah, I'm not even going to check whether or not that index is appropriate, because that's a concern of surrounding code. So now instead of just taking whatever the use count is, we would say, give me, get the record, add a certain index. The index is whatever use count is plus 1. discount plus plus, of course. And what we also have to make sure is that we decrement the use count, because in this case, we kind of kill the first entry. So in this case, we would move the green one over, the green bar, the first index, one over. So we forget about this. So our total count decreases. And then the rest of the code can just pretend like it works without being a ring buffer, essentially. So all we need to do is basically, okay, pretend our use count is dropped and pretend our record count is dropped. So yeah. And just to make sure that we don't do anything stupid, oh no, we already checked this here. So that should be fine. Oh, we don't even have to do this because we always set our record count at the end to whatever the use count is, because after recording a new entry, we always clear basically whatever comes after the use. So we get a new record at the desired location. Do everything as before. So then we can take the same code in our remove and essentially remove the assert here, because now we don't have any limits on how much we can insert. We decrement the use count and we use our new get record function instead of taking this like we used to, because now it's a little bit more complicated to access the elements. And everything else here is fine. The same goes for our undo. All we'd have to do here is also just use our new function about how to access the records, but everything else should be the same. So like so. And in this case, since we just read the thing by value, I'm just going to dereference the return value so that we get value instead of a pointer, because we don't need to change the record. We only need to know where it is relatively to the start of our records. And the same goes for redo. So we do this. Increment the use count. Yeah, we already made sure that we do not exceed our record count. And now the question is, did I miss something? Because right now our record is 32. Our max record count is 32. So let's see if I can actually put in more than 32 characters. Okay, I did put in more than 32 characters. Cool. And now let's make a little better test to see. So assuming this is more than 32 characters, because we have the text count here, it tells us that we have 48 characters. I'm just going to fill in 2 lines. And now I'm going to call the undo, and it should only be able to undo the last 32 characters. Yeah, and it stops here. So that's good. And it should be able to redo them. But now we have some limited undo redo, and we can specify however big our buffer should be for this, which is quite nice. So now we should be able to just add it a lot, however much we like. But it has, of course, some limitations on how much we can actually go back. Hey, that was actually quite easy. We will probably discover some more errors as we go along with this and try some different use cases. But so far, I'm actually quite happy with how this worked out. And we only spent like half an hour. So yeah, that's cool. So let's just increase this back to 1024. And now let's see what's the next thing in our to-do list is. Oh, that nicely. Did 2 things in half an hour. Great. Wait for input. Do you guys want to know about wait for input? Because right now, yeah, let's do that. That's probably interesting, all things considered. Because right now, our editor runs at 500 frames per second, which is a little bit excessive, even if you don't do anything. So an easy fix would be to just sleep. So we could just add a sleep. in our platform code, in our main code, we could essentially just after we processed the frame and we saw that nothing happened, so we need to check that first. We just sleep for a moment, and then it would take a little longer for the user to reactivate our window, basically. But up until then, so hopefully the stream does not turn black. Up until then, our application is not gonna basically burn out one whole core, since it's just an editor. It's just a tool that is supposed to run at the side while you're doing some actual work. We don't want it to burn one of our cores, and that's why it's the editor basically be a little bit more reactive instead of just having a busy loop. So one way to do so is to introduce a concept of to see whether or not anything has changed that is worth updating. So at the beginning of the frame, here for instance, we can just say something like update and set that to false, for instance. Now it's a little bit tedious because we have to check for all this inputs and whether or not we reacted to them and if something actually changed. But we could just say, well, whenever there's a character that was pressed, no matter what it did, we wanted to reactivate. That probably is the easiest thing. Because when the user is typing something, he kind of expects some kind of reaction. We can just redraw the frame at that point. It's not going to be visible to the user, but it's just a little cleaner than going through all these branches and detecting if there's an actual change that needs to be notified. So all I'm going to do is, in the update, I'm going to say do update whenever the character count is not 0. So that's all we do. And we are gonna have a new variable outside of the main loop, which basically tells the application whether or not we are in a busy mode or in a waiting mode. So is waiting, let's say is waiting for input, and we could just start at true, it doesn't matter. And if we're in the is waiting for input mode, we can get here, do the update, and if we see no update, say if we're waiting and we see that do update happened, we want to stop waiting. Otherwise, we can just do a sleep and so we can just, there's a Windows kernel call called sleep. We just specify an amount of milliseconds you want to sleep. In our case, we could just sleep for a whole frame. That's 16 milliseconds. And then we basically just reduce the amount our computer has to work. And if we, essentially all we have to do is say if, we're just gonna do this lazily. So we say, if we are in the waiting state, we sleep. And then we set the waiting state to whatever not to update is. So that next loop, we do not sleep, for instance, if some input happens. See if that works at all. So we have so that already suggests to me, oh yeah, we run at half a frame, 32 frames per second, which means this actually works. And if we look at our CPU usage, it's now like about 1% instead of being 28%, which it used to be. So if I just comment that sleep out, if I comment that sleep out, we should be burning our core again. As you see, we're back at our max speed. We're at about 500, 600 frames per second. We're doing lots of busy work. Nothing really exciting happens, but we are kind of sleeping. We are kind of not sleeping, we're just doing nothing. And with this little change, the application still remains responsive. And as you can see, whenever I type something, the FPS spikes because it's expecting the next frame to also be updated. But the power consumption or the core utilization is way, way, way less. So that's one way to do it, and that's quite platform independent. But we can do a little better but with a Windows-specific call. We can just basically tell the operating system, hey, please wake us up again if there's actually something for us to do, and until then, just let us sleep. And that function is called, I think, message wait for input. Wait for input objects, of course, very specific. Yeah, so that's a function, and essentially what it does is, on one hand, it waits for input, like whenever there is in our peak message here, whenever there's an input of a certain type that we care about, which we can specify with the wake mask. Essentially, in the wake mask, you can say, hey, I want all inputs, or I just want input, which means you want mouse and keyboard and raw input, or you just say, which I just want keys and mouse, or I just want key press, because right now we do not even process mouse events. You can specify on which inputs to wait, and everything else will just be ignored. And additionally to that, there is a concept of handles that you can wait on. So if you're, for instance, are actually waiting for some kind of operation to be completed, maybe in another thread, that would also wake you up. In our case, our count and our handles would just be 0 because we don't have anything else we're waiting on. So we're gonna just use this. And after we rendered, also a good idea to kind of move that code a little back. So after the rendering, like here, we use wait for message objects. We tell it we don't have any objects we're waiting on. Did I implement little null? I don't remember. Let's see. I'm so crazy. Okay, and then we have wait all. It's just basically a mask that tells us whether or not we wait of any of these objects to be ready, or if we require them all to be ready at once. I think this only relates to these. Yeah, that only relates to the objects, so it doesn't matter if you put in false or true, because we don't have any objects. Then you have a timeout that you could be waiting on, just like in our sleep. I could just specify 60 milliseconds here, and it would only wait for 16 milliseconds at most, but we wanted to wait as long as it takes for a new input to arrive. And for that, there is a special value. It's just called infinite in all caps, because nobody else would ever want to name anything like that. So then we have a wake mask, which I also talked about. So we're just going to use Q as input, but we could get away with just using Q as key, for instance. And there's other things we could be waiting on, like Q as all input, which tells you what's the mask of, basically. So if you have some combination you're interested in, You can choose the appropriate thing for you. And the tricky part is now, first of all, this is also a good old function which returns a lot of things, but essentially it shouldn't return us anything except for wait object 0. So we can, because we don't have any other objects, we only have the input, and we set the timeout to infinite. It could only fail or return to us wait object 0. So I just say, hey, if this ever not returns wait object 0, this is an error. We might have to investigate and look if we are using this function properly. Okay, failed. And we're gonna provide the error code. Don't type it once, but I'm gonna say I'm just gonna close the application. This should not occur if anything, if Windows does not mess anything. Be such a simple way to call this function. It should hardly be possible to mess this up. So, and the other thing is we only want to call this function if we are waiting on input, because if we're not waiting on input, we just want the application to go. Maybe we have some animations that we want to play or anything. So we should be able to override this behavior so that we can render full time when we need it. Like we render every frame when we need it, and only if we are waiting for something, we try to save power. So if wait for input and whatever, we do this, and we can off. Build it. Waiting for yeah, naming stuff is hard. Wait for input, better name. Is net waiting for input? I'm not sure. I'm just is waiting for it. That at least indicates to people who are reading the code that it's Boolean. So, and now as you see, the frame rate does not update, and the caret here does not blink because we're waiting for input. But as soon as I type something, it's still responsive. But in this stage, it essentially has no core utilization whatsoever, which is great. Which is a good behavior for a tool that is only supposed to be something that you use on the side and not predominate your system. So yeah, that's cool. And whenever I use the mouse or type something, it just bounces back up, but then it just immediately drops. Task Manager needs a little bit to recognize that this is actually not doing anything to update usage value, but other than that, I can still max it out if I need it, like so, just by wiggling the mouse around. But as soon as I don't need it, as soon as there's no input going to this window, it's all good. So that's cool. We still can keep all the functionality we have. Well, besides the blinking cursor. But in that case, we could essentially, yeah, we could do a little bit trickery, but I personally don't even care for a blinking cursor, so it's up to you. What do you want to do? So, yeah, just to make this one blink and have this update all the time. I don't really think it's worth it, but as I was showing you, can still just specify the 16 milliseconds here, for instance, instead of the infinite, if you want this animation to But this, of course, well, requires that your caret does not blink at a frequency that is less or equal to this. It has to be a multiple of your frame rate. Like you want to blink it once every 30 frames, which would be once per half a second, for instance. And this call is also no longer valid because now we can get the timeout. And we can also get the timeout error, but the only error we do not want to get is the wait fail. So I'm going to change this slightly. So now the caret blinks and responsive. And we're also even a little more responsive because in our previous example with the sleep, we always slept for 16 milliseconds. In this case, we stop sleeping as soon as input arrives. So whatever happens earlier, like whether or not the time runs out or we get input, we will sleep in both cases. So it's more responsive in this way anyways. I'm just going to keep this for now because it looks nicer, but I'm going to double the frame rates, basically, that we're waiting on. So we're waiting on 2 seconds now, 2 frames now. But everything still seems fine, and we just have a lower utilization of the. Yeah. That's how easy it is. So, yeah, that's cool. Now the next thing in our to-do list, this. Put this low. And also I don't have to because we essentially check every frame if something happens. So I can just say, well, do update. If not do update or wait 4 seconds, then we an additional variable that we keep around, because this is always going to be set on each frame. So it should behave the same. Cool. Undo works. Redo works. Yeah, and we can stop in between and then try to redo, but there's nothing to redo, so because it deleted the future history. Okay, cool. That works. So next thing on the list. Next thing on the list was breezing through this, man. So we have wait for input, checking of the line space. I think that that things like the console terminal are basically just adding some or removing some spacing between the lines. Well, multi-windows add pitch to yeah, all that is not really more like a long-term to do. We have done all these things, so I guess the next thing we want to do is add some more navigational features for the text editor. So as you noticed, maybe I'll type something in here and add a new line. I cannot move to the previous line by pressing up or down or anything. So I just have to, I can only move from left to right. All we implemented so far is jumping to the start and the end of all the text. But we would like to navigate on a line basis too. For instance, I want to go to the end of the line or just the line above or below. So let's try to do that. And this is, yeah, just navigational feature. It doesn't really affect the undo or redo system. Just how to calculate the cursor properly. So let's see. yeah. No, that's not it. Did it? Of push char. And we have, we get keys. Yeah, we have some codes, and we have, as you can see, we have move left and right, but we don't have move up and down. So let's add them first, and then see what we have to do to make them work. So we don't have any code dealing with contents of the string really, other than just arbitrary inserting and removing characters in the code. So yeah, to move up, the idea would be that you have to identify where the next new line is, which is probably at the beginning of the line that you currently are. And then you have to move to the beginning of the previous line, and then offset from the beginning of the previous line to however much it was you started from in characters. That would be the idea. So let's try to do that. So like we have a text cursor, so while cursor, while there's actually something to do, we say the text, by the way, is this variable. Should I increase the size? And all we do is basically we check our cursor location. I'm not sure if I want to manipulate the cursor directly, but for now it doesn't really hurt. So essentially all we want to do is check whether or not this new line character, in which case we would break. Otherwise we decrement. And we also need to decrement the cursor either way, because we also want to skip the new. So we get that. I just make it a little bit more readable. Like, not really the head, but I'm just gonna call it that. And whatever we read, if that was a new line, we break out of the loop. And since we want to execute this code twice, I'm just gonna refactor this into a function and maybe edit code. We have a section where mark the text editing, text manipulation, right? I'm gonna do that. Call this move to line start. Gonna take a string and a text cursor, but since we're not gonna change the contents of the string, I'm gonna pass the string by value, but the text cursor by pointer. That means we have to do annoying dereference stuff here, and just to make sure that this is not used improperly, we're gonna assert that our text cursor is actually less equal to count. Cannot be less than 0 because we defined it as a usize unsigned integer. We do that, then we have to not decrement the pointer, we have to decrement content of the cursor. For you to make it maybe a little better to read, I'm just going to do this instead. Maybe that's better to read. And what we also care for is how much we moved. So basically, we can call this basically the column that we're at. So if you imagine I'm starting here and I want to move to the start of the line, it's essentially will tell us how many characters in between where I started to the line are, and this is essentially called the column in your text editors. I have this here somewhere too. It's whatever is after the after the dot. So in case it's 26. 26. And we want to keep track of that, so all we have to do that is we increment that, but in this case we do not count the skipped new line. Do I actually want? I mean, it's called move to the start. Shouldn't be skipping the new line anyways. I'm gonna do this instead, and then I'm gonna return. You can imagine that if you are already at the new line character, it would just return 0 because it didn't move at all. Move to line start. That's what we need. And we're just gonna do that, and we're gonna remember the column because we want to use that in order to navigate into the line above at the same column location. So like this. Then we need to basically, if we are actually, if we have any characters, because if you look at the code, it basically could also break out of this loop whenever there are no characters at all. So it doesn't have to have a new line symbol at the location where it's at. So it could be 0. And it could be 0 and no location. Do I like that? Special case that the user then has to think about. Always a little bad behavior. Think this through. So if this is 0, regardless of what I'm reading, can I just skip it if it's 0? If it's on the new line, cannot be 0 and on the right. Fine, actually fine. So all I wanted to do is basically, if there's actually a positive value here, it means we are at a new line character, and we can decrement so that we can skip it, and so we end up at the previous line. And then all we have to do is basically call move to start new line again. So essentially what we do is say we start here in front of the case. This first call would put us here. Then the decrement would put us at the beginning of the previous line where the new line character is, which in this case happens to be here. And then if we call move to line start again, we end up at the beginning of the previous line. And the question is, and then after that we want just to move however many columns we have here, if there are so many columns available. So somebody said something. Cannot read anything. So okay. Previous line. Previous line column. Maybe that's a dumb name, but could also call it previous line length. This is what we get here because we started, as in this case, we started at the very beginning of the line and moved all the way to the start. So this also tells us how many columns that previous line has at all. And now we want to move whatever is smaller. So if the previous line does not have as many columns as our current line, we cannot move to our the same amount. So we have to cap it by the however big the previous line is. So for instance, when I'm in this line here and I push up, as you can see, I end up here, even though I actually wanted to be like right above it, but there's just not enough characters to navigate to that position. Some editors support some kind of virtual byte spacing, but I personally don't like that, so I'm just gonna stick with this. So, and all we want to do is say column is whatever the minimum of column and previous line length is. And then all we want to say is basically, hey, text cursor, please add that column amount to yourself. And now we see whether or not we can navigate up or down. So, just gonna type some stuff here, type a new line. Gonna go somewhere in the middle, like K, and I should end up at the K above. And as you already see, it didn't work. And yeah, so it is one off, and that could be because we, we just insert this kind of new line, not insert. There's another way to insert new lines in Windows. It's typically caret return and \n, basically 2 characters instead of just one, and you have to ignore this one when navigating files. But in order to see what's happening, I'm just gonna use a little test case. And in order to do so, if we look at our can I insert more than one character to? Yeah, I just wanted to do a little test case, but let's just run Visual Studio. I'm gonna type in hello and world. Now I'm gonna add some breakpoint at the appropriate file if I ever manage to find it. So here in our upcode, we want to investigate what happens. So I'm gonna move up, and all I want, shut up Windows, I want to end up between the two L's here. I press up. And first things first, we're gonna call move to line start. Our cursor is currently at position 9. and if you look at, come on Windows, show me the thing. Yeah, if I look at the current situation, our column count should be 3, since we're at the letter after the letter R. So we have that should be our current position. We'll see what our move to line start returns. Reads the head. It reads an L, which is after. Oh yeah, since it reads the character after the cursor, the column count should be reduced by 1. Yeah, we already see the problem here. So essentially, when our cursor is between the R and the L, it will contextually it's at the letter L, but we want to count the distance from L to the beginning, which should be 3 instead of 4. But it reads an L at the case, so it should be text cursor -1, which is also fine to do because we also assert that our text cursor here is positive. So we should always be able to subtract 1 from that. So let's just add that little change. So that makes sense. Sometimes it's just good to iterate over the code and just see if your algorithm makes any sense whatsoever, instead of just staring at code and thinking whether or not that makes any sense. Especially if it's so simple, where just one iteration of the loop might help you to find some little mistakes you did. Come on. Oh, hello, world. Here, I move up. Oh yeah, that worked. Wow. So let's add some lines. Here it works. I move up. Some longer line here, and I move up, and I end at however much I could end up with. Yeah, that's cool. I cannot move down yet, but so far this works like a charm. Yeah, cool. So if I'm if I'm at start, still works. If I have a empty line in between. How about that? I cannot navigate down. So if I move up here, yeah, that still works. Cool. So, and here's a little thing I like to add, which comes in handy and is pretty easy to implement. So let's say you have just in our, like in our example, we have case 0 colon, then we have some brace open, brace close, break, for instance. We have case 1. So it's already great that I can move up. It just feels so much better. You wouldn't even. So let's say I'm at this case and I just want to move to the upper case. If I move up, what happens is that I end up at the beginning of the line because there was an empty line in between. But I want to remember, basically, when navigating up or down, I want to remember at which column I started, so it tries to move us to this preferred column, which I called it in my text editor. It tries to stick to this preferred column that you started with, so that even if you move up or down, it will still try to if it can, move to that preferred location, which feels way better. So let's just try to implement that first before we do the downwards navigation. And for that, this is another variable that we need to basically keep consistent. So maybe this is the time where we do a little bit of factoring and unify our text and our text cursor into some kind of more easier structure that we can reason about and pass around together. Instead of having 3 loose variables that we have to take care of, we can bundle them together. Consider them as a unit. So I don't know how I want to call this, but I'm just going to call it edit text because that's its purpose. It has a string, which is actual text, and it has a cursor wherever our text cursor was. And now, additionally to that, we want a preferred column. Maybe a dumb name, but that's just what I'm thinking. And now we can basically change these functions around so that they take a text, edit text. You can just try to implement wrappers for them, but I personally don't think I will ever need to call these alone with these 2 arguments. So I'm just going to change it so that everything uses an edit text. Yeah, edit text is dumb name, maybe, but it is. Just gonna call it edit text. Just call it edit. Why not? And this, the max count, because this could also be part of the edit text. What would that mean then? Yeah, I'm just gonna. Sorry, everyone. I'm gonna keep this around for now, and just try to replace wherever the occurrences of edit text. So, and that's all. Well, and whenever we access the text cursor, we want it cursor that. So well, that not. Move the line start. That's why not. Undo history. Nah. Second. First things first. A little bit of refactoring. Everybody loves refactoring code. Yay. This is pretty clean. Oh yeah, light. Light is always. Edit here and text count. Sense. And now actually what I'm gonna do is go one step further. Essentially basically just lets you add edit text to the history so that you can pass. I'm gonna call this so that you no longer have to pass multiple things. You just pass the history, and it has access to the text that it's trying to manipulate record for. Makes the interface a little bit easier. We have this. That shouldn't change. That changes insofar that I do not no longer have to provide the cursor because the cursor is text. Well, since I only need the cursor, I'm just gonna. So a similar thing here. I just, hey, give me the edit, the dumb name still, but it's consistent with the rest. And just gonna copy it since I'm not gonna change it. And it should down here somewhere. I should cursor edit.text.base cursor. This is just textual replacement. It's very interesting. Not explaining this too well. And here, since we're changing text, we are going to, hey, give me the edit from the history, but I want it as a pointer. Hey, Cakes, welcome back. Now it's too high. Okay, guys, since you're taking the time to explain this to me, I'm gonna change it a bit again. So, are you still there, Cakes? What is the issue? So what is the issue? The activation is too high. What does that mean? Do I have to put it down? Yeah, no, it's okay. I like to improve the quality. So, what is the issue exactly? Hi, Pushtoy. Good evening or whatever. Maybe it's night for you again. Okay, I really don't know what to do. Maybe I put it down too much. It was at 14, then I put it down to 16. Okay, so maybe it's good enough. Let me help you. Yeah, I would love to help you. I would love to take help from you. Sure. Do you want it? Yeah. Which cog? I'm already at the noise gate. Closing filters. Okay, I changed this, so I'm gonna revert the change. There are many clogs in OBS, so is this here or which one do you mean? I'm so sorry, guys. Last time everybody said the mic was fine, so I didn't change it at all. Yeah, that's the one I was in. Okay, good. And now? Does this even have sound? This should not have sound at all. So yeah. Extended settings, advanced audio settings, you mean? Monitor. You want me to monitor my sound? Why? Yeah, I know I can hear myself, but it didn't help me. I'm not gonna try to to calibrate this on stream. It just doesn't work. We can do this if you ever have time, but it's not a good idea. I just want a quick fix if you could provide one, if you think there's something I could do. But maybe it's because when I'm focusing on the code, I keep kind of mumbling to myself, and that's the issue, just because I don't speak clearly, and now I try to speak more clearly. Yeah, maybe that's just the issue. Well, anyways, I'm just gonna try to speak louder. Maybe that helps. Yeah, my mumbling, of course. No, thanks, but I have to fix this later because I really don't know, man. Yeah. This is a very low professional quality stream. Okay. So I was about to get the text from the history as a pointer so that we can change it in the undo. Sorry guys, but it's probably not the best thing to do on stream. I should have done this prior, but I thought that that it was fine last week, so I just stuck to whatever I had. Yeah. So now we can just pass the edit to the insert directly, like so. Same goes for the remove. And we have to change the cursor a bit. And in the undo, we essentially do the same. Yeah, thanks for helping though, because I just cannot really hear. Cannot really hear the difference. Maybe I'm just deaf or something. Maybe I have shitty headphones. Could be anything. So, but other than that, can you guys follow along? Is anything besides that? Oh, it's not. I'm not done yet. Is anything besides that bothering you? Am I rushing stuff? Am I explaining stuff too poorly? Can always do that in the Q&A session, but you know, we no longer need that. We do not longer need that. And here we just say text. So same goes for here. And now, as you can see, I removed some redundant arguments that you no longer have to pass around manually, since they are bundled together in the history. No, I'm not monitoring it right now because it would distract me. But I did monitor it while trying to calibrate it. Thanks, Cakes. I should make my own Twitch chat, which can only report Cakes being rude and nothing else. So let's see. What's left here? Edit text. Oh, there's an X. I somehow accidentally slapped that, and wow, that was a very bad pun, but I went for it anyways. So let's get to our history. We allocate it here, and somewhere we have also our text buffer, which is this thing. So we can instead, what we want to do, say, hey, history text, please. Maybe we just allocate some history tag, text from our amazing allocators. So just gonna say, hey, allocate me some items, maybe like 1024, like we had, and everything else should be 0 because we zeroed out the history. And in our current concept, it would be a good idea, I think, to have a max count here. Well, so that we don't have to weird magic like so. So yeah, that makes sense. Get back to the edit file, and wherever we have a max count, we're just going to use whatever the text edit stores as a count. So I'm getting super thirsty, guys. You have to excuse me in a second. I need to get some water. But I mean, we're almost done for today anyway, so maybe I can hold it a little bit. Just a little bit for you guys. So, max count. Whenever do I use that? Here. Insert can now handle this on itself. Like here. Isn't it nice to delete stuff and to make the interface a little cleaner? Oh, this is also part of the text, so pass this manually. Insert. So did I ever? Yeah, here. Never used it. So here. Press the max count. This is the only place. Insert is the only thing that is concerned with max count. Anything else was not concerned with it, but I had to pass it down the whole line. Left align windows. What do you mean left align windows? What are you talking about? You mean the task? You mean my bar here? Welcome, Nano 433. So, oh boy. So let's see. What is the mess that I made? A little bit of busy work. The cursor is now part of the history, and in order to reflect this a little easier, I'm gonna say auto text equals history text, since we're gonna be manipulating the text a lot. Blasphemy. Oh my, Ashley, welcome. You're on the proper side. So text cursor. What else? Move to line start. I don't have to move this. I can pass in the text. I'm gonna call this edit because it's less confusing. As dumb as it might sound, I'm gonna call this edit. See where it takes me. Sometimes you just have to roll with it. And sometimes you have to just bear with my line wrapping. This is nothing interesting happening here. I'm just replacing stuff. So going through the motions. I hope you guys can come up with some better naming than I did. Edit cursor is just edit text count. That makes sense. What else? So we see how beautiful this is. We can now remove 3 of this argument, and now this gets a whole lot easier to understand. It's just history is the whole thing that manages the text also, and we just add a new entry. Same goes here. No typos can happen in this code. Almost readable, wouldn't you say? Oops, my editor crashed because it's awesome. Just amazing. An amazing human being, my editor. What is so 118. Okay. So what am I going to do here? Text max count text. Oh yeah, that's a beautiful thing. It's called text base. Obviously, we all know that. Text cursor is edit cursor. Also, this is I think this is redundant now because our remove takes care of that. Yeah, it only removes if we can remove. Maybe not the best behavior, but I'm gonna keep it because it's easier. So this is gonna be edit count again. Going left and right is actually quite easy, as you can see. The only case is when you have new lines which consist of 2 characters, then it's a little bit more ugly. 2, 4, 3. So yeah, edit text count. That's me. Oh, almost there. History, all this can go away. Isn't that beautiful? All this can just go away. Maybe not. Maybe I was wrong. No, I wasn't. I just forgot to delete it here too. What a good feeling. 172. This is going edit cursor. Oh. What did I do? Oh yeah. Now no need to dereference an integer value. Yeah, I guess I did that wrong. Did I? Did I miscount the amount of streams I did? Crazy. Yeah, I guess I did it wrong. Good. I thought I updated this. Wrong. Is it there now? Anyway. Good point. Catch. Yeah, where was I? So now we have this, and it's part of our edit. Could keep that globally, but I can just. This is basically my weird text rendering here. And that cursor is a different cursor. I can just say auto edit re-edit. Since we're not going to change it in here, I'm just gonna copy it by value. So I can say edit text count and edit cursor. Pursue. We are almost there. It's called history text. Very inconsistent. And this is edit.text. Compiled, but does it work? can move up. That's awesome. And I can undo everything, probably. And I can redo everything. Hey, look at this. It works. That's good enough a test for me. Yeah, I try to pay attention. I'm really bad at this, but hey. So now we want to, oh yeah, right, exactly. We had some preparations for our preferred column count here. And all we want to do is basically, if we move left or right, we want to update this column count. And if we move up or down, we want to use the preferred column count instead of whatever column we started with. So that should be easy. VK is not part of the Vulkan language. It actually stands for virtual key code. So if we move left, we say move to start, which essentially, move to start essentially also just always tells us the column. We can I don't have to comment this because the return value is actually called column. So, all we want to do is basically move to column to figure out at which column we are, but we're going to do it with some fake cursor so that we don't actually move, only we pretend to move in order to figure out what the preferred column is. So, oh yeah, that's okay. Change my mind. Why are you not changing the file? Because I try to open up the same one over and over again. How about this? Get. This is a bit expensive, but hey, we pass in our text edit. We are not intending to change it. All we do is pretend that we're moving this edit that we passed by value. So we're actually not changing anything. So, and then I don't have to do this weird magicry. Just gonna update the preferred column after we move left or right. Like so. And if we move up or down, instead of using the column we're started at, we're gonna use, just gonna ignore this. I'm just gonna comment this out. Is just gonna be whatever our preferred column is and whatever the line that we're on has as a maximum line length. So I'm gonna use edit and previous line. So, and let's see if this behavior works. It's preferred column, not columns. So that looks good. Hello. Remember, people, no matter how good your editor is, you will be making typos all the time. So let's say this is our test scenario. We are at the end here. And if I move up, I want to remain at this column if I can. And as you see, I end up at the appropriate time. So if this was longer, for instance, and I move, I go back to world and then move up, it placed me at the wrong location. Oh, okay. Did I type in max or min? Min. Maybe preferred column count is messed up. But you know, the beauty about this is we can just, which we haven't taken much, and just print some more debug information. We have this, and we should have something like so that we just see what's going on here. This updates properly. What's up with the FPS? You might have missed it. Yeah, okay. You might have missed it, but I introduced a way to basically sleep a little bit on input so that we do not max out one of our cores. Yeah, exactly. So that we keep the power consumption and the resources for the editor quite low. We can go lower than this, but at some points we could sleep totally and wait for input, but then we wouldn't have any animations whatsoever. So this is a good compromise to remain responsive and also low on the power consumption. Oh, yeah, you see, we do not update the preferred column when editing text, which is bull bad. All we have to do is basically update the preferred column when we do insert. Oh, we can do that since the since we moved the whole thing into insert. We could do it in here. I want. Maybe I don't want that. But maybe I do. Hard to say. It's not just sleep, it's a special function that can sleep or wait on input. You can watch the WOD, but it's appropriately called message wait for multiple objects. And you can specify a time to wait on or input to wait on, and whatever triggers first will wake up your process. So, yeah. What did I... 2 fails in a row, man. That's... And this guy does a text editor tutorial on the internet. So get line column. Identify under font. Okay. Basically just was defined below, and it needs to higher up the file so that compiler can find it. And I'm not gonna add some forward declarations because I'm just can't be bothered. Can't. So now that updates properly if we edit the text. We start here. The column is 5. That's correct. Preferred column is still 5. 3, 4, 5. Yeah, that works. Maybe it was just because of the editing, but not a really conclusive test, but just a hint. That's if we start at a lower here. Yeah, that looks good. Oh, that's also cool because you're at the first line and you move up, you jump to the beginning of the line. Whether or not you want that is up to you, but I don't mind that behavior. So now it's time to implement move down, and then we have a very basic functioning editor, besides the fact that we cannot load files, but that's quite easy to do at the end. Yeah, my own editor does not update at all because I do not set a timeout on when to update. Only updates if I move the mouse or do some input. because why shouldn't it do anything? It should be some project on the side staying there until I'm ready to use it. I tell it when to activate. Well, the operating system. You get what I'm saying. I, for a moment, lost my train of thought, but I got it back. Now moving down is similar to moving up in that we first have to figure out at which column we are. But actually, we don't even have to do that anymore since we have this preferred column concept. So all I'm going to do is implement a move to line end function, similar to this, but different. I shouldn't have 0 FPS then, because it basically still renders it and takes whatever time elapsed between the two calls. It just takes a longer time between those two calls, and then the calculation is part of that. Yeah. You can see that in this buffer too. Like it stays at 60 FPS, but sometimes it spikes weird. Yeah, so basically we want to go to the end of the line. So as long as our text cursor S, then I'll edit text count. We can advance. This case, we want to read what is actually behind the cursor. And if that is a new line, we stop. Otherwise, we cursor, and the column is something we do not calculate in this case, since we do not know how far we are from the beginning of the line. We cannot really say at which column we end. So this puts us at the end of the line at the new line character. So you would still have to manually skip that, which is essentially the same behavior as with move to the lines. Yeah, so we say, oh, that's say move to line. Autofocus, am I off? Come on, boy. Focus me. Make me sharp. Stupid thing. Give me a second. No, it's not this. Video capture. Is it? Almost got it. Is it better? It's better, right? Should be good. Confirmation. Serious fade. Am I good? Anyway, we're almost done for today, so let's keep going. So we move to the end of the line, and now we want to do the same thing as when moving up, and that we move from wherever we end up to the preferred column, like so. So this is a bit more difficult since we do not know how much. Yes, I mean, I could essentially move to the other end of the line, move back to the beginning of the, so I know how long the line is, and then add the appropriate column. I mean, it's not that heavily expensive. Your lines are not going to be that long anyways, especially your lines, because you all told me that line wrapping is not a thing for you, so your lines are going to be like 200 characters most, and that's nothing. So we're just going to do that. So first things first, if our edit cursor is still not at the end of the text, we can still move the cursor further, which means we are at some new line character. And then we can move to the end of the line again. And then we can move, sorry, then we can essentially do the same thing that we did here. So since we end up in the similar situation, we are at the, so just to reiterate, let's say we're here at the end of the case word. We move down, which means we move to the end of this current line, which is here. Then we skip the new line character here, if there is an and, which brings us at this position. And then we go to the, then we need to go to the end of the next line, which brings us to this position. And then if we go back to the beginning of the line, we can count how long the line is. This is what we do in this case. So we end up here, here. And then we can advance, but whatever our preferred column count is. So yeah, a bit hacky. You could do it differently, but this should work. That's good enough for now. Unless you misspell column. Yeah, it's almost the same because there is no such thing. Okay. So I can move up, I can move down. If I'm at the last line and move down, I should end up at the end of the line, but I don't because of this good behavior. That would be something you have to check for. We might do that depending on how this behaves and whether or not it is annoying. But we can move up and down, and what's nice about this is we keep to the preferred column. So if we're here, we're at column 5. And if we move up, we remain at column 5. And if we move down, we remain at column 5, which makes editing text quite easy, especially if you're dealing with text that has the same prefix or something. And yeah, that's cool. But also what we would love to have is to navigate to the back and front of the line. Because right now, all we can do is basically go to the beginning of the whole text and the end of the whole text, which is not as satisfying as moving to the start and end of the line. Let's do that. And we would need some, I don't know what you guys prefer to navigate to the beginning and end. I do pause and end, or whatever it's called in English. I don't know what's called in English. Home and end, I guess. I'm gonna use that, and I'm gonna use yeah, I don't have support for holding down keys right now, so we're gonna do that later. So right now I'm just gonna use page up and page down. Get to the, it's dumb, but just for a little test. To get to the beginning and end of the line. There's no modes here. Get out of here. Modes. No, but you could do a modal editor if you like. But I personally am not such a big. So page, give me a page. Next. It's just, yeah, nach oben Taste. Obviously. Prior and next. Yeah. Up, down, prior, next. You're living in a painful world, my friend. All you have to do is hold down string and use the arrow keys. And you get wherever you want, or you just tap pause twice to move to the actual beginning of the line, or the beginning of the line context-wise. There's not a billion key cuts. At least this is what I prefer. But you can do whatever you want with this setup. You just have to wrap it around another state machine, essentially, that handles the different inputs differently. That's all you have to do. So to go to the beginning of the line, we first just move to the line start, and that's all we do. And we want to, yeah, that should be all. And we want to update our preferred cursor, because, oh yeah, because why not? I mean, just edit preferred column. I mean, it should be at 0 because it's the beginning of the line. That's the whole function. Just test this real quick. Type stuff. Somewhere in between the line, in the middle of the line here, I press prior, and I end up at the beginning of the line. That was up, not prior. But was it correct though? Oh no, it was home. Of course, that's up. That's prior. Okay, good. And now for the end of the line. See this 2 lines here? Nothing. So, I feel like I added a lot of features in a short amount of time. Or maybe that's just... Now we want to move to the end of the line. And the problem here is that we do not know how to update the preferred column. So before we move to the end of the line, we could just move to the start of the line, like so. Then we remember cursor, or we just remember the start is whatever the edit cursor is. And then after we move to the end of the line, we can just say edit cursor minus start, our preferred column. So it's a bit dumb because you could do this probably a little differently, but we have to essentially figure out how long the line is. So that's why we move first back and then to, so that we can set the third column. If that ever works. Prior is page up or something. I don't know what's called in English. So. Look at this. Look at this. I keep missing some input, I think, when I do it too quickly, but I'm not quite sure, actually. Oh, no, that's just a caret that blinks at some interval where we don't see the change, which is questionable. So essentially we could, yeah, why not? I mean, we're crazy people, right? We're all crazy people. We are so crazy that we have this blink speed, right? So which tells us we have this blink time here, which tells us in which interval to blink. So what we could do is essentially, if we do update, if there's some input, we reset the blink time so that the cursor is always visible, while and set show cursor to true. Or caret. I mean, I have too many cursors. Up. We just essentially reset the cursor, the caret, whenever there's new input, so that we will see that it moved immediately without waiting for the blinking. Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah, now it doesn't seem like it is disappearing if I move it too quickly. That is good. That is good. I like that. Yeah, that's good behavior. So, but with that, we're at the end of our stream. I think we implemented a lot of nice things. This is almost like usable. You can do some, I mean, for a game that would be perfect because you're not gonna write pages of text. All you want to do is correct some typos, and that's fine for that purpose. And it's also fine enough if you specify a big enough buffer to use with a text editor. If you can essentially put a cap on how big your files are going to be, you can just have that much of a buffer, and it should be fine, even if you Control Alt delete and then redo everything. So yeah, I'm quite happy with where we are. We could do, of course, we can do a lot of visual improvements and stuff like that, but the main purpose is to show the logical part of the text editing. The visuals were just some interface because I don't want to presuppose some kind of things that you have. Yeah, of course, syntax highlighting any moment now. I'm gonna parse C++ live on stream. So easy. But we can do a very basic syntax highlighting. Maybe later. So the resolution of this window, I stretched this to be twice the resolution, so we can just display the resolution if you guys are curious. Since we have amazing technology, we should just be able to display the size like so. Oh my god, type it all. That's also something I have to get rid of, but maybe later. So you see the actual resolution is this. It's 632 by 340, but it's stretched to a multiple. So we can also display the zoom. So, oh yeah, if I put in a percentage sign somewhere, we can display the zoom. So the zoom right now is twice. So basically the window is actually doubled in the resolution. I just stretch it up so that you guys can see it a little better. But if I set the zoom to 1, it would be a 1-to-1 mapping. Yeah, that would be actually nice. Microcontroller stuff is pretty interesting, and if software keeps getting worse and worse, we all just gonna have some ARM computer that we program our own OSs to, and maybe that will work. So this is the actual resolution where everything is rendered at. So if I take a screenshot, you can see how it would actually look like. Also, I could do some fake. Do you guys have a preferred background color? Because this yellow yellow poop color is not too great. So how about we do some very almost dark background color. And now it almost looks like a real editor, even though the rendering is still adding some border around the text. But I changed the background fill color, which makes it a little better. But yeah, as you can see in my editor, I prefer to be a bit lighter still. And if we add alpha blending, we can also make the text a little dimmer, so that it's, in my opinion, a little easier to read. So you cannot really see it, probably, especially not on the stream, but actually there is a very thin border around everything. I'm kind of doubting myself right now if that is actually true. So I'm just gonna make it a bit brighter because I think it's still too dark. But then we should be able to, yeah, now we can see the outline better. But this is the color, as you can see, is basically the color that I use in my editor, and I preferred yeah, a little lighter dark. That makes sense. So, put it in there. God, computers. Okay. And now you can see there's still a border around the characters because we don't do any blendings. But I think it looks quite good. And if you happened to not by accident take the broken version of STB TrueType, which is really what a dumb coincidence, then your font rendering should be fine too. So I'm not gonna make it pure black. It's hard on the eyes. To me at least. I mean, you can do whatever you want.